right? So I had the SeatGeek CEO, Jack Rotzinger, on my podcast a while ago. And I asked him about ticketing, right? And they're obviously one of the larger businesses in sports ticketing and concert ticketing and entertainment ticketing. And what he told me was he thinks that within the next 5 years, more than 80% to 100% of tickets for sporting events will be NFTs. And the reason why he thinks that is because it's just so much easier, right? So you or I, we enter the lottery, we win a ticket for $150 or $250. We post it online in the secondary market. A practice round will go for $1,000. A tournament round maybe go for $2,000 or $3,000. That's thousands of dollars in additional revenue that they're not capturing. Not only on a ticketing basis, but millions of dollars when you think about the commissions they could earn. It's obviously more trusted and more secure.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Borelli, and you are tuned into the Sport of Business podcast. A few years ago, I started my business, Cuts Clothing, from my parents' basement in Washington. Leading a startup has its perks. One of them is connecting with like-minded individuals. On this podcast, you'll hear from some of the people I've gotten close with along the way. Get their takes on trends, business, and current events. And for future founders out there, hopefully you'll take something home that you can apply to your brand. This is the Sport of Business. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Sport of Business podcast with my friend Joe Pompliano of Huddle Up. Absolutely stoked to connect with you today. I've been a big fan, followed you on Twitter, followed you and your brother over the course of the last few years, and excited to learn more about your story.
Thanks so much for having me, man. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. So I wanted just to jump right in, and obviously Cuts is our tagline is for the sport of business, and you cover the business of sports a lot in your in Huddle Up. You just want to give our audience a quick little rundown what Huddle Up is and how you got your start?
Yeah, so I do a variety of things. Huddle Up is one of them for sure, and kind of takes up the majority of the time, I would say. But Huddle Up is a newsletter. It is delivered to your inbox every day, Monday through Friday. And it covers the business of sports. The money and business behind sports is our tagline. And really what it was it was just born out of passion. I grew up with 4 brothers. We played every sport you could imagine, the 5 of us: basketball, football, baseball, tried golf, everything you could imagine, really. And I thought I wanted to be a professional athlete at first, of course, like everyone. That was very quickly obvious that wasn't going to happen. And then I wanted to be a agent. I wanted to be a sports agent. And I realized pretty quickly again that wasn't what I was going to happen. I actually spent some time at Octagon Sports Agency in Washington, D.C. I did an internship there in college. And I realized, hey, you know what, this probably isn't for me, right? It's really difficult to break into the business unless you know someone or you have some kind of connection. And then therefore it's kind of the top 1% of everyone does well, right? So it's a numbers game to some degree, and just wasn't really what I wanted to do after learning more about it. So I went up to New York City and I started working in finance. I worked at JP Morgan for the last 4 to 5 years. And I was on the fixed income trading desk, and I learned a lot about kind of not only financial markets, but just business in general, right? And what I found myself interested in was a mix of both. I started looking into, hey, how does this team make money? How does this league make money? Why does the player do an endorsement deal with this company versus the other company? Why are they doing X over Z over Y, and so forth? And I was constantly telling my friends and other people about it, and family members. And eventually my girlfriend, now fiance, was just like, why don't you just write a newsletter about it, right? And to be honest, at first it was literally, I was just finding stuff that I thought was interesting or cool, articles, links, videos, etc. And I was putting in an email and I was sending it to people. And then it turned into, okay, here's the article, here's my opinion or take on it. And then it turned into this kind of hybrid model where I still do something similar, but it's much less structured, and it's kind of just my unfiltered opinions on the topics around business and sports. And I always joke about it. Really what it was just my curiosity. And it still is today. People always try to pigeonhole individuals into these categories and say, you talk about this niche and you're only supposed to cover the NFL and you only talk about the business of the NFL. And the reality is I write about everything. I talk about these things. I podcast about them. I make videos about them. And it's just things that I'm interested about. So it could be one day a player contract in the NFL. And then the next day it is, this NFT company raised $100 million, right? It's just things that I find interesting across business, culture, crypto, sports, et cetera. And I talk about them. And my bet is that there's tons of individuals, millions of individuals around the world that are just as interested in these topics as I am. And I've been doing it for about a year or two now. And it's gone well. I do it full time now. I invest alongside of it, probably spend about 50% of my time creating content and 50% investing. And what's really helped is the audience, right? You see access to additional deals on the venture side, and all these doors and these opportunities get opened. But it's been an incredible shift and something that I'm really happy with and really proud of.
Wow. I love that story about leading your curiosity. I mean, that's very similar to Cuts, working at an advertising agency and couldn't find something to wear, and let my curiosity lead me to starting Cuts. And one thing I wanted to ask you on that is, was there a moment in time you felt like a story why you decided to leave corporate America, specifically JP Morgan, and say, hey, was there a defining moment you could share?
Yeah, I don't know if there was one specific moment, but I do know that there was a specific thought. And the thought was, I always looked to my left and to my right when I was at work. And I always thought to myself, like, is this something that you want to do when you're 50 years old, when you're 60 years old? And is this something that you're going to be happy with, irrespective of money, right? Money obviously plays a part of the equation. And I think people are naive to dismiss it completely. But just from like a pure kind of work standpoint, the quality of the work, the context of the work, all of that, is this something that you're going to enjoy doing? Is this something that you're going to be proud of, and so forth? And the answer to me over time and pretty early on was no, right? The second I started realizing what mattered more in life and started thinking about it more, it was no. And I looked again to my right and to my left, and I realized that there were people I was working with that were 45, 55, 65 years old and were doing similar jobs or similar things that I was doing. And again, that's not a knock on any of them, because I think that everyone asked themselves this question at some point. And like, some people have different reasons, right? Maybe that is the best thing that they can do to provide for their family and so forth. Maybe that's something that they really enjoy. And again, there's a million reasons. But ultimately for me, the answer was no. So I started thinking about, what am I passionate about, right? Because the cliche around you have to be passionate about something to succeed is certainly a cliche. And I think it's probably overused to some degree, but more so, I think that you have to have this relentless effort and push and drive to be successful at what you want. And naturally, the things that you have that relentless effort and push and drive to be good at, you're going to be passionate about, right? So I knew that I was passionate about sports and the intersection of business and crypto and culture and all these things. And it was something that I really loved. And it was something that I didn't feel like I was working when I was doing. So I knew that if I had that passion around that the work ethic and the drive and the consistency and the push would come along with it, that would make me successful, right? So I didn't necessarily even have these massive doubts. Obviously, you're nervous to some degree when you're leaving a job at what most people would believe is kind of somewhat top of pyramid when it comes to finance and that kind of line of work, right? It's JP Morgan. I thought when I got the job, I was like, this is the best thing ever. And then you leave and you're like, you know what? There's so much more to life. And I realized that pretty quickly on.
I love that, because not enough young people look 3, 4 5 steps ahead. And I had a similar, outlook too. It hit me one day when my boss was trying to go to his kid's t-ball game, and he had Dasani water bottles came in, and he had a big presentation, and I could see it really like pain him that he couldn't go to his kid's first baseball game. And then he ended up just like storming out of the office and saying, I'm not missing this. This is more important. And then it was a big strife between his boss and him. And I go, I got to be able to get my schedule on my time where I can prioritize the things that are important and move things around so I can coach my kid in t-ball one day when that happens. And I think that's so important for young people to have a vision of their life. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be the category of which you want to live one day, and then go find that and then work backwards. And it's really great to see that you had that outlook.
Well,
Awesome.
One of the things that I always think about and my brothers and I talk about frequently is just like the idea behind what are you optimizing for? And I think that we talk about it so much because it applies to various things. It applies to your life, your career, your friendships, your family, investments, all of these things, right? And the general thought process that we use is just like first principles thinking of like, what do we want in the end of this? What are we optimizing for? What is the end outcome that we want as a result of these decisions? And when it came to work, it was exactly that, right? I wanted to be able to spend time with my family. I wanted to be able to spend time with my then girlfriend, now fiance, and soon wife. I wanted to be able to spend time with my parents. I wanted to be able to do things on my schedule, right? And certainly with every line of work, if you're trying to build a business and doing these things, there's sacrifices that come along with that. But being able to dictate that on your own terms is extremely powerful. And again, I think you can use this for a variety of topics, right? If you're making venture capital investments, are you looking for the riskiest things in the world to compound capital aggressively? Or are you looking for something safe to have a nest egg in 4, 5, 6, 7 years for retirement, right? You figure out what you're optimizing for, and then you make the decisions that best help you implement those goals.
Wow, that it's so funny. That's a common theme of what our team has gone from. It started of 4 guys that were highly optimized. We knew what the goal was to now 50. And individual teams, when they get distracted or they're not being as effective, is exactly what you said. They lose what they're trying to optimize for, so they start doing a bunch of stuff which they seem busy, but it's not what they're meant to do or meant to optimize. So I'm gonna. It's great just learning from you. Get me fired up. I'm just thinking of all these teams that I need to really focus them in on. What was some of the moments that you were like, damn, this is going to be hard? You left JP Morgan and now you're like, okay, I got to have a living, I got to make money. It looks like you moved to Miami then. How did you go about like the startup? Did you have income before you started and left, and then you said, okay, I have enough to survive? Like, walk me through that process of.
Yeah, I had built it to the point where I had a sustainable level of income, enough to know that I wasn't going to be hungry or be out on the streets or anything like that. And thankfully, right, I come from a family where that wasn't going to be an issue regardless, right? I have, my parents would have taken me in, my brothers, whatever. It didn't matter. But I knew that, like, my point is that I was in a different scenario than a lot of other entrepreneurs face. I'm not tone deaf to the idea that, like, there's levels of risk, right? I think every entrepreneur takes some level of risk regardless of the situation, but there's certainly caveats within that of like, okay, this person has every last dollar that they have in this business and they need it to succeed, versus someone like me who I was certainly nervous, but I had built up enough revenue and enough income at the time where it was somewhat comparable to what I was doing. I was just taking the risk of leaving the job, right? Of not being able to maybe come back to that same position, or giving up something that I had worked for 3 or 4 or 5 years to get into. And in Wall Street, everyone knows this that has worked on Wall Street, but it's very structured. So you start as an analyst, or maybe an intern, and then an analyst, associate vice president, and then you move up executive director and MD. So I was an associate at the time. And basically my whole thought process was like, oh, am I going to lose this title? Is this going to set me back? Am I making a mistake? And then I thought back to exactly what I just mentioned, which was, people do this with way less comfort. You know what I mean? Like I was making income off of it. It wasn't a big business by any means, but I thought to myself, okay, if people are doing this with no kind of catch-all, with no degree of the ability to fail, then I need to do this, because I'd just be being scared if I didn't, and I would regret it. So that is when it became obvious to me. But then pretty much immediately, to answer your second question around when I knew it was going to be difficult or what was hard about it, I knew pretty much immediately, because I was working a lot of hours at JP Morgan, and I was working way more hours on this. And I still do to this day, because when you're running a solo kind of single person content business, videos don't get made if you don't make them. Podcasts don't get made if you don't record them. Newsletters don't get written if you don't write them, right? Tweets don't get said if you don't tweet them. And there's so many other things that fall on top of you. That's just the stuff people see. And then when you're working with sponsors, you have to negotiate contracts, you have to create pitch decks, you have to send invoices, you have to make sure the wires hit, you have to get the copy, you have to get the imagery, you have to do all these different things. Then they want metrics, right? So my point is, there's just like a million different things that people don't think about for solo entrepreneurs. So you end up working a lot more. Eventually, you're able to scale some of the business, right? I have a couple full-time employees that work for me now.
Great.
But then that brings on a whole new set of challenges where you're now responsible for the livelihood of people, where people are leaving their jobs to come work for you. And you have this new degree of responsibility that makes it even more challenging.
Yeah, that's bringing people on is definitely scary. We started as 4 guys. I was the founder. Then I brought on an accountant, a data engineer, and a product development role. And the 4 of us, it was, we were all bought in, and we knew what the task was. But it seems like every 10 employees that we brought on, it got harder and harder to keep them optimized and keep them focused. And so OKRs has been a huge, win for us. But yeah, I can totally see. So that's great to hear. How big, I know your family, you talk about your family a little bit, and then specifically your brothers, like how impactful have they been of your, career path and journey?
Oh, hugely impactful for sure. My oldest brother, Anthony, started creating content a few years prior and started investing in businesses, private companies a few years prior than I did. So just that opportunity to not only learn from him, but leverage the resources and the audience and all that stuff that he had built was hugely impactful and super helpful for me, for sure. So there's always a degree of hard work, right? I don't think that anyone would have been able to accomplish not only this, but other things in life without that. But ultimately, there is a huge degree of the ability to leverage some of those, audience and all that stuff to help myself. But I think outside of just that, like, we're super close. We all invest together. We just went to last weekend. We went to a Miami Heat game together, right? So we're always doing things together. 4 out of the 5 of us now live in Miami. So we live literally a few blocks from each other. And we hang out all the time. So just from like a standpoint of like surround yourself with good people who have the right intentions and are all trying to accomplish ambitious things, I think that's probably the biggest key of just like surrounding yourself with the right people. And for me, I just was lucky and fortunate that was my brother's.
It was funny. I got in a Uber the other day, and the Uber driver is listening to your brother. It was great.
Oh, this podcast. That's fantastic. Yeah. It's weird because we all look alike somewhat. And my girlfriend and my brother's wife will say that me and him look the most alike, me and Anthony. So I get a lot, we get recognized, and whether it's in Brickell or somewhere else in Miami or elsewhere. So I've certainly been called Anthony a time or two before. But it's always cool, man. It's something that never gets old. We always appreciate it. If someone wants to talk or hang out or ask a question, it's certainly a position that I never thought that I would be in. But it's certainly something that you appreciate and you respect.
That's awesome. So why did you move to Miami? Was it for business taxes or the scene? What got you to Miami from New York?
So it was a combination of a few different things. I had lived in New York for 4 to 5 years at this point, but I'm from North Carolina, so I didn't necessarily have any physical ties to the area. I had felt like I did everything I wanted to do in New York for those 4 or 5 years. You know, you go to all the major venues, you go to the sporting events, you go to the restaurants, you do all these cool things. So that was part of it. When the pandemic hit, New York City changed a lot, obviously. So New York City completely shut down. Nothing was open for a long period of time, longer than basically anywhere else in the country. So certainly COVID played another part of that. But then when I left, right? So when I was at JP Morgan, you're physically tied to that area. Now you're not tied to anything when you're doing the entrepreneurial route. So again, that was point 3. And then Miami, I hate cold weather. I like warm weather. That was point 4. Point 5 is there's a totally different vibe down here, and people give a shit all the time. Not me specifically, but just people who moved to Miami. And I get it. When I thought about Miami at first, my brother moved down here a year or 2 ago now, and I moved down maybe 4 or 5 months after. And I came to visit once, and my thoughts beforehand were like, I've been to South Beach. I don't think I want to live in Miami. That sounds hectic. That sounds crazy. Sounds like I didn't even really love it when I was there. It was fun, but like, I don't think I want to do that. And then I came, and we obviously don't live in South Beach, but we live on the mainland here in Brickell. And my whole opinion changed. It was just a completely different feeling. And part of that is the government, I think, right? There's certainly local politicians that feel like they're rooting for you to succeed versus other places that I lived. And I think that's a huge component. But yeah, it was just a great feeling being around here. And my girlfriend and I at the time said we'd give it a year. My family and my brothers maintained a place in New York, and we're like, we can go back when we want to. Her family's still up there. We'll see what happens. And we just never ended up going back. So we ended up staying long-term, and it's been awesome, man. It's been fantastic.
Every time I go back to Miami, I'm like, we got to move the team out there. It seems like there's more and more legislation in California. Like this morning, there's a new legislation out that's proposing a 32-hour work week instead of a 40-hour work week. And to your point, like, I would like to be in an area that's a little more pro business and pro startups, because, if a company has over 50 employees, we might have to go to a 32-hour work week, which I know the culture in here, people aren't going to want that, and they're going to come in, but it's just crazy that that's actually.
Yeah, we came out to LA for the Super Bowl, my brothers and I, and we were joking when we landed. We said, I can't wait to see what 55% of your income going to government facilities gets you out here. Like, I thought I was going to see flying cars. I thought I was going to see like the best highways ever and all this stuff. And it was a joke, but it's serious in some instance of like, you really want to live in an area where it feels like the politicians and the people that are responsible for making these legislations and these rules and these laws are rooting for you to succeed, right? And they want you to be there. They want to attract like-minded people to that area. And that's exactly what we felt about Miami. Not only from a crypto standpoint, I think Miami has gotten this narrative that it's like the crypto town and everyone's moving there for crypto, but it's just entrepreneurs in general. There's tons of meetups, there's lunches, there's coffees, there's dinners, tons of people meeting every day. And I think that is a direct reflection of how Mayor Suarez and other local officials have treated the area. They've recruited people to come live here versus the opposite of driving people out. And you mentioned California. I think it was last year and now 2 consecutive years. It was the first time there's population loss in California's history, right? And again, major cities are negatively impacted in my mind from COVID because you have the opportunity now to live outside of these major metropolitan areas. So maybe that has some degree to it. But a part of this is obviously elected officials, right? And their ability to recruit people to live in their place, in their city. And I think Miami has done an exceptional job of that.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting if the negative loss, that might be part of the plan for the LA politicians.
Yeah.
I'm Cuban and I grew up going to Miami a lot. My mom's an immigrant of Cuba. And so she's such a fan of both the mayor and the governor DeSantis, and just, coming from, oppressed people in Cuba. Miami's like the exact opposite. It's pro business, pro freedoms. And we love that. Kind of getting more into, how you do your job. I was so impressed with the Michael Jordan, your most recent, you talked about, his off court earnings and how he was able to develop so much money over the years. How do you go about researching that, verifying facts? Like, how do you do your job?
So it's a long process. I basically scour a lot of the internet. I now have a lot of friends within and around the industry that help with phone calls and knowledge-based stuff and everything like that. So it's a long process. I don't necessarily have like one route. I know people that create content that like, I do this same formula every single time. I write notes in Notion, then I go search these links, and then I structure in a Google Sheet and I do these things. I don't really do that. A lot of it is the way the articles, especially in the newsletter, are structured is I try to put at least half of it as personal opinion or a certain degree. And I always think about like, what would make this interesting to someone like me, right? Anyone can regurgitate the same press releases or the same news or whatever, right? And really only the original source is the valuable one, whoever does it first. So instead of being in that game, how about we create content that is valuable for people that want to hear your opinion, right? Because that's the one thing that other people can't copy or other people don't have. So part of it is certainly research-based and knowledge-based. And then the other part is just understanding the industry and the trends and all of that really well and making sure you're educated so then you can provide a valuable opinion. So it's a mix of both. But I would say that the one thing that I found so important since I've started doing all of this is just continue to educate myself. You know what I mean? You fall behind sometimes because you feel like you're just constantly creating and creating and creating, and you're in this flywheel where you're just trying to get as much output from the content side as possible. But you really have to make sure that you're constantly educating yourself, right? And understanding what's exactly happening and why these things are happening. So if you can dumb it down on a first principles level and start to think about some of these things in a much more simplistic way, I would say, and really carve out time. I carve out time every day to make sure I'm staying up to date on everything and reading and doing all these things, then you'll be well off. And I think that takes some of the research and the time associated with that out of the way.
So something recent, are the A's moving to Vegas or are they staying in Oakland?
I don't know, man. This has been going on for a long period of time. And these situations are always super unique to me. And one of the things that I've talked a lot about recently is the Buffalo Bills, right? And it's a similar situation because there's a team, right? An NFL team, the Bills in Buffalo. And they threatened to move the team and the franchise to Austin, Texas. And this happens every so often, right? LA used to be the thing that they did. They used to say, all right, we're going to move to LA. New Orleans did this. Minnesota did this. Several other teams did this for years. They would say, if you guys don't build us our new stadium, we're going to move. The Bills are unique because they're basically like the one thing Buffalo has. They're the one reason why people would go visit Western New York outside of kind of the family related reasons or friends and stuff like that. So they were put in this weird situation where now they have to basically fund a new stadium with public money. And the Governor Hochul, committed $850 million from state and a combination of state and local money. So you're in this weird scenario now where people on Long Island who may be fans of the Jets or the Giants and will never, ever go to a Bills game are now literally paying for a stadium in Buffalo when the money could be used for other things. And there's nuance to this, of course. There's, Governor Hochul will say, I assume, that the $850 million is 0.4% of the $216 million budget. And that's true for sure. But I'm sure you could also make the argument that $850 million could be used for a lot of good things, right?
Yeah.
Buffalo is obviously a unique area. You talk about New York City, there's 8 million people that live there and outside of that even. So when it comes to Oakland, like they're running in the same things. Las Vegas paid $750 million to get the Raiders there for a new stadium, right? They lured them there. So that's the scenario that you find yourself in, is like, how much can we pay a team to come here? And obviously teams are interested in different areas for different reasons, but Las Vegas has proven to be an area now where you can really expand from a business perspective for sports teams.
Tell me some good news about the Sonics. Are they coming back to Seattle? I'm originally from Seattle. Are we going to finally get an NBA team?
I mean, I wouldn't hold your breath, but I think it's a possibility for sure. I think the league will probably expand at some point. There's certain things that you have to think about. So obviously a team pays an expansion fee, right? And that gets split up between the league's partners and the teams and everything. But that also means that they get a percentage of the revenue since it's split up, right? So you have to basically figure out what that line of demarcation is it worth it or is it not? And right now it hasn't been worth it. But I think at some point, some people expected that they may have done it outside of the pandemic because they lost so much money from the pandemic, but they didn't. So now it's a matter of like, when does it actually happen? And I think at some point they would like for it to happen. And I think Seattle is on a short list of cities that would get considered. One, because they had a team. What's that?
It's probably Seattle, Vegas, and that's it, maybe.
Yeah, Seattle, Vegas. I've seen Kansas City or, somewhere around there. I've seen one interesting one is Virginia Beach, which I thought was interesting, but I'll have to send you a map at some point. There's this map that I've seen that basically you can't be within like another team's TV area. You basically want to find like these empty pockets where you're reaching a new fan base and you're not stealing from other teams. And Virginia Beach has this like really unique area actually, where there's like a ton of people from a population standpoint. No other teams really touch the area from a fan standpoint. And then they have the infrastructure, they have the stadium and everything that you would need. So I don't think that's going to happen, right? If I would probably consider that the longest of the shots, but unique. And then I think Seattle, if I had to rank them, would be near the top of the list.
Yeah, that was tragic. As I was just going into college, and Kevin Durant was there. We were going to draft Russ, and then the owner just on a dime said, "Hey, we're going to Oklahoma City." And then I was homeless as a sports fan. I became a Laker fan because I moved to LA, but I feel like it's not really my team, especially with LeBron there. I like LeBron off the court, but on the court, I was such a Kobe guy that he's kind of like the stepbrother to LA. I think it's time for him to go.
I love it, man.
Let's get into a little bit of, the blockchain, and a lot of people that listen to this are going to be business people, more entry level, and how that can affect business. What's the biggest ways you think the blockchain is going to affect business in 2022 forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's several ways. Like, I think specifically the blockchain is obviously value when it comes to digital assets and specifically Bitcoin and so forth. But really the blockchain is just a database when you think about it in that context. And the truth is, and many people within crypto and ancillary businesses would get mad at this, but the reality is you don't need this completely decentralized database for a lot of things. There's a reason why some of the biggest companies in the world, have these very centralized hierarchy structures, right? Hierarchical structures. And the reason for that is because it works really well, right? If you were Jeff Bezos, you wouldn't have been able to build Amazon in this completely decentralized way where you were storing information in these smaller blocks, and decisions were decentralized and so forth. So I think that the blockchain is a really unique technology and can solve a lot of purposes. So I'll give you one example since you asked, and one I think a lot about is ticketing, right? So I had the SeatGeek CEO, Jack Rotzinger, on my podcast a while ago. And I asked him about ticketing, right? And they're obviously one of the larger businesses in sports ticketing and concert ticketing and entertainment ticketing. And what he told me was he thinks that within the next 5 years, more than 80% to 100% of tickets for sporting events will be NFTs. And the reason why he thinks that is because it's just so much easier, right? And if you think about it, again, this is probably not the perfect example because the Masters and Augusta National don't necessarily care about maximizing revenue. But let's use them as an example. They issue these tickets, right? You get them through a lottery, so anyone can go buy them. And they're 150, 250, whatever they are. They're a few $100s. And then they sell for thousands of dollars on the secondary market. So you or I, we enter the lottery, we win a ticket for $150 or $250. We post it online in the secondary market. A practice round will go for $1,000. A tournament round maybe go for $2,000 or $3,000. That's thousands of dollars in additional revenue that they're not capturing. Not only on a ticketing basis, but millions of dollars when you think about the commissions they could earn. It's obviously more trusted and more secure. And again, I don't necessarily know if this needs to be some super decentralized infrastructure that can be set up. You could probably get really, really, really close to the same thing through a centralized database. But again, I think people are going to start to think about this in a much more unique capacity than they have previously.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I could totally see like, the Lakers, providing a membership where if you hold the NFT, you get special access to X, Y, or Z. And then, it would be a kickback to the Lakers every time a ticket gets sold. And I can't wait for that. It's going to be easier too. I hate buying tickets on the second-hand market now. And when I go to sporting events, it's just such a hassle. You're always wondering if it's real or not. And the authentication of it is such a big asset for ticketing. Is there anything else you could see it really affecting?
I'd have to think about it more, but I think we've already seen it in the collectible space for sure. I think digital collectibles, I go back and forth on this all the time because people, I don't know if they get angry, but they certainly make comments about it that digital collectibles just have no value, right? And I think there's some that do and some that don't. And there's certainly been an overproduction to some degree of like, there's superstar athletes that have put out NFTs that have sold out in minutes. And then there's superstar athletes that have put them out that have literally still not sold out after a year. And I think it really depends on the projects and the utility and everything around that. But outside of just kind of NFTs in general and the artwork and all of those things, I think digital collectibles, there's something there because if you, it's different, right? So my general theory around this is that everything that we've had in kind of the analog world, whether it's stock certificates, bond, whatever it is, right? There's going to be a digital application of that. So when you think about collectibles, that's just the next variation is you're going to move these things that have historically been physical into the digital world. And if you know anything about humans love collecting shit, whatever it is, right? There's memorabilia, there's tickets, there's whatever. So I think if you give people the ability to do that in the digital world, that's going to be obviously unique. And then we've already seen this kind of happen, right? We've seen this play out in real time now where Tom Brady starts this company called Autograph. It started a year, maybe 2 years ago now. He's a co-founder in the business. It's already worth over $4 billion reportedly. So wow. You think about kind of the demand and it's just another offering, right? So Fanatics is getting in this game. DraftKings is getting in this game. There's a bunch of other players that are getting in this game. And really the reason behind it is because there's demand, right? Why do you do anything in business? You need to create the supply for the demand. And I think we're going to continue to see that market expand over time, whether people think it's valuable or not. And I think there's going to be a lot of lessons learned out of that, kind of what is valuable, what's not valuable, what works for consumers and what doesn't. But ultimately, I think that that's probably an asset class that's here to stay.
We've been pitched recently to, we send a lot of stuff to athletes, and this one startup company wants us to kind of pilot their NFT where we would send a shirt to Katie. Katie would walk in with it. They would make an NFT, and then we would sell that as like the Cuts One NFT with Katie wearing a shirt. And do you see that as being something that's worth testing for us?
Let me make sure I understand it correctly. So it's an NFT of what exactly? Of
an athlete walking in wearing our shirt that's replicated on the NFT.
Okay. All right. So the NFT is the NFT.
And the collectible.
Gotcha. As the collectible. It could be, right? I think like my general thought on this stuff is just like, what is the demand? And I think you'll probably figure that out pretty quickly if someone is interested in this or not. And I'm probably not your perfect target market to expand this on. Like I don't own a bunch of NFTs. I don't pay super, super close attention to the market. And I don't look at this stuff on like a daily basis from an investment perspective. Sure, I've seen some interesting things and I've dabbled in it a little bit. But I think ultimately what we're going to find is I personally, right, this is my personal opinion, is that we're going to see this shakeout between things that offer utility and don't. And we've already seen this to some degree. I don't even know if this is necessarily like a hot take or a hot opinion. I think that over time, people are just going to want things that offer them more utility. And one of my core theses on the NFT side is that athletes are going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of this, because if you think about athletes, one, it's an extremely community-driven concept in general. So sports teams, right? I like this. I like the New York Giants because my dad likes the New York Giants. We used to watch the games together. My friends like the New York Giants, whatever. It's a community-driven asset to start with. And then when you think about athletes, they're obviously the integral part of that asset. And then they also have some of the most unique utility in the world, right? So Steph Curry is a good example. He released an NFT with FTX. And as part of the NFT, you are eligible to, they did these drops where he recruited people to come celebrate his birthday with them, right? You got to meet him in person. You got to shoot some shots with him on the Golden State Warriors court, and you got to have like a cake with him, right? And maybe he's there for an hour. But at the end of the day, that's really freaking cool utility. You know what I mean? If you're a fan of Steph Curry, that's an awesome opportunity. And that's probably worth minting his NFT for the chance to be able to go do that, depending on the price and everything else relative. But there's tons of opportunities like that, right? Who wouldn't want to throw and play catch with Tom Brady? Who wouldn't want to go on Tom Brady's boat for the Super Bowl parade, right? Like there's endless possibilities. And my general point is that athletes, more than anyone else in the world, have the access to this utility, right? That they are wanted and desired by fans to go and do these things with. So I think utility is going to become an even bigger portion of this. And I think, to be honest, like that's going to be the overarching theme of the next few years of like, what utility does this project offer? What utility does this athlete offer? Because at the end of the day, like artwork is artwork. There's always going to be value in that, whether it's the analog or the digital application. But ultimately, my opinion, at least, I think people desire something more than that and they want utility.
Mm-hmm. Kind of goes back to what you said originally. What are you optimizing for? You could apply that same principle towards NFTs and crypto. What do you have this is kind of a different subject, but do you have a best investment and worst investment that like a crazy bad investment that you thought was going to do really well that just tanked, or a really good surprising story?
I don't know. I mean, most of my thesis has just been buy Bitcoin for a long period of time. And that's worked out relatively well given the appreciation over the last, 5 or 6 or 7 years. And that has really been all I've done. My whole thing is like, you have to know what you're good at, right? And again, it's what are you optimizing for? And one of the things that I optimize for is freedom when it comes to investment decisions. And I know that I do not have the time or the capability or the knowledge to be a stock picker, right? It's just not my game. There's people who are incredible at that. There's technical analysts who understand the charts really well. They can understand supply and demand equations. They know exactly how to pick these stocks and make money. That's not me. You have to know the game that you're good at. And for me, when the light bulb went off and I really started doing the 1,000 hours of homework on Bitcoin and really understanding the possibilities that existed, it was like, oh shit, like, this is it. And it made it so much more simple for me just to do 1,000 hours of homework on that and really understand one thing really well and make a concentrated bet versus expanding myself across all these different avenues and trying to pick different stocks or build this diversified portfolio or all these different things. And again, that's different for different people, right? You may want to do that. You may be at a different point in your life. You may have different goals, or you may be optimizing for different things. But for me, it's become really easy to where I can just kind of set it and forget it and make these kind of daily cost averaging and buy into Bitcoin. I've been doing that for a long period of time now. And it's really helped me out with everything else in my life because I spend much less time thinking about other stuff. And part of this is venture investing too. There's that's a whole different beast in my mind, right? There's obviously things and rules that don't necessarily apply there that would apply to the individual. But I think, again, I've said it multiple times now, like you just have to figure out what you're optimizing for and then figure out the steps that will get to your end goal.
Yeah, I love that. I when I first got into investing in Bitcoin, I was trying to do it. You mentioned where I'd, look at the trends, join X, Y, and Z text thread groups. It was even before Discord came out and, hey, what is this a good buy? Is this not? And running cuts, I just didn't have the time to do it. It became such a hassle and such a stress. It wasn't fun. And then I just decided, okay, I'm going to put, each week, I'm going to do a daily buy. And then if there's certain times, I pause it, or certain times I want to go all in, I'll do that. But I'm not going to, spend hours trying to figure out, when to buy or when not, and just trust that.
The other thing I would say too, especially for entrepreneurs, is oftentimes the greatest outcome financially will be from the equity in your own business, right? So if you think about it in that context, sure, like Jeff Bezos, I think he was a seed investor in Google. That never fucking happens. You know what I mean? Like the chances of that actually happening are so outsized, it's not even worth considering. So as the average entrepreneur, oftentimes the greatest thing you can do is just spend all your time, energy, and effort focusing on your core business, because if that business succeeds, then it'll open up the opportunity for you to do other things financially, because the equity in that business that you own will appreciate so much in value. So that's usually my general thought process on that, is just like, make it as simple as possible. And it's one of the things too that I've learned from so many other incredible entrepreneurs. It's just like, focus on what you can control and just do that really, really well. And all this other stuff will take care of itself, and just make very simplistic decisions and get them down to basically the base layer, and then go from there. And what you'll find is like all of these things start to compound, right? Whether it's the equity in your business, whether it's venture investments or whatever, just relationships in general. I think it all kind of takes care of itself if you're able to focus.
I think I feel like I'm talking to myself here. I preach that to the team. Hey, we should do less, but do the few things that we're going to do. Let's do them really great. And that was really the big moment for Cuts. I think most entrepreneurs are people who feel like they can do a lot, like they can be successful a lot. That's what made them an entrepreneur. But also that's the one, often what makes you successful is also what can make you fail, where you do feel like there's so much. And early on, I was starting Cuts. We were about a $10 million business. And this jewelry guy came up. He's like, hey, can you run my Shopify account, and I'll pay you a minimum of $100,000 a year, and then I'll give you any commissions over this. And I could have made like $500,000. And I remember I sat there with one of my good mentors, and he was like, you know what, this seems like a lot of money, but you got such a good thing going. Like, don't do that. Just stay focused, do Cuts, and ride that. And exactly what you're saying. And it was a tempting no. It was hard for me to say no, but I really believe that was like one of the moments that it kind of made me focus a little bit more on Cuts, because I was giving away this money, and it really, allowed me to really get deep focus and take us to the next way. So yeah, staying focused in what you're doing is so important. And I think I constantly have to remind myself that as the business gets bigger, it's harder and harder to keep from doing, a lot of opportunities come our way, but staying on to picking the right opportunities is equally important.
One of the things I think a lot about, to your point, is something that I've seen firsthand. It's the reason why I think about it so much, because before I didn't necessarily believe it. I'd heard it, but it's the concept of like 1 year can change your life if you're super focused. Mm-hmm. And it's so true. It's so true. Like, people think about goals and they say, hey, this is maybe 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. I'd really love to be here. And when I first started building my business from a content perspective, like, I had these goals in mind, and they're almost laughable when I think about them now, right? Like, one, they were just so small. I needed to think bigger and way bigger. And then two, I reached them so much quicker than I thought I would, because the thing is, like, you just need to get started, and everything's not going to be perfect. I've gone back, I've changed artwork on the podcast. I've changed the intro. I've done guests differently. I've asked questions differently. Like, you start to think about all these things. The newsletter, as I mentioned earlier, used to be something completely different, and now it's something else, right? The art in there has changed. You change all of these things. But if you don't start, you're never going to start. And I think that for me, it was just like, start, focus as much as you can, and do as good of a job as you can, and be proud of your work, and everything will take care of itself. But if you don't start, I've seen so many people hit me up and they say, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z, right? So whether it's similar to me or something else. And then they come back to me in 6 months or 8 months or 12 months, and they're still circling the wagons around the same idea. And if they would have just started, they would be along the road, right? And maybe it doesn't work out, or maybe it does work out. But the point is, they would know so much more about their journey and what they want to accomplish and what they want to do, versus being in that exact same position. So my general advice to people when these conversations come up around kind of building businesses or thinking about these things or doing content, it's just like, just do it. Just start. Just do it now. And do it tomorrow. Because if you don't, you're going to find yourself in this situation where you're so much further behind than you would have liked. Or vice versa, if you do start, you'll find yourself so incredibly happy with yourself 6 months from now or a year from now, because you'll think to yourself, I couldn't have even imagined this would have been possible. And again, maybe it doesn't play out that way. Maybe it doesn't work, but ultimately you're going to, one, regret if you don't try it. Two, you'll know much quicker if it's going to work or not, rather than just debating it for a year.
Yeah, I have a buddy that is always telling me, hey, I want to do this or that idea. And then he thought about doing an e-commerce company for about 4 years. He finally did it. And then he realized, like, the suppliers and the things, it was just not a business he could do. And I sat down with him and said, hey, if you would have just started this idea right away, think of how much further you wasted 4 years in your head debating it. Falling forward is so important. Just moving forward every single day. I moved home when I started Cuts. And the desperate, like being 25 to 27, living at home in Wenatchee, Washington, which is this tiny little town, that just being there, like the insatisfaction of living at home, I think was such a blessing because it really forced me to say, I'm not going to be the kid that moved home, that just started a t-shirt company and it fails. Like, I'm going to make this successful. And at the time, I didn't even realize that arena was like exactly what I needed. It removed all distractions. It made me really committed to it. I had to put all my money into this idea, which even further the commitment towards the idea. And then I was able to find people that really wanted to be a part of the business. The last piece of question I have is, what's the biggest lesson you've learned from saying, hey, I'm going to start my own business, that you think like, you might say what you said originally, but is there one big thing that you've learned?
Yeah, I think the idea of just getting started is certainly one aspect of it, but to make sure I don't cheat here, I'll give you another, which is just like, this shit is hard. You know what I mean? You gain a whole new level of respect for people who try to build things, for people who do things on their own, for entrepreneurs in general, not even just content people, right? I think content is one of those jobs and careers that's extremely misunderstood. You know, people think that you're on Twitter all day or on your phone or creating content. And the reality is, like, it's really difficult and it takes a lot of time and effort and energy. But I think ultimately you just gain this respect for people who are doing similar things. And like, you'll never, you know, sure, there's spats that come up online and people give each other shit and they do these things, but you don't punch down at people. You know what I mean? If you see someone doing the same stuff, there's this level of respect where you're like, all right, I get it. You know, I may not agree with everything that you say, but I see you working really hard. I see you trying your best. I see that this is really difficult and I respect you for that. And I think that that's one thing that you learn. It's just like, it's a completely different level of kind of understanding once you enter the arena and understand that, like, hey, there's going to be some bumps and bruises. This isn't always going to be great. The highs are really high, the lows are really low. But ultimately, you're in the arena and you're trying your best and you're working really hard at it. And you start to respect people on a different level that you see doing similar work.
Awesome. Yeah, I get fired up just hearing you talk, and I was super excited to do this podcast. But I've been such a fan and followed you on Twitter for a while. You and your brother are just.
I hope you're still a fan after this.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was actually telling my girlfriend we need to make a trip to Miami. I want to see all the spots. Brickell seems like somewhere where we would want to move, and it seems like it's like our age, late 20s, early 30s. Brickell.
Yeah, Brickell's great, man. It's been fun. It's a nice area. It's obviously close to everything that you need, whether you're going to South Beach or Coconut Grove or Midtown or Wynwood, whatever. It's kind of in the center. But yeah, it has this feel to it where it's like, yeah, late 20s, early 30s, something like that. And there's restaurants, there's bars, there's all that stuff. So it honestly kind of feels like New York City to a degree. It's just warmer and cleaner and you get a little more space.
I did New Year's Eve in Miami, and we went to like Poppy Steak and some of these other really fun restaurants that were cool.
Yeah, that's a good spot to be on New Year's Eve, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was amazed with the suitcase of steak that they brought out. And I actually came back to the team. I was like, what a good branding thing. Like, you know, probably 1 out of every 10 people comes in and buys the actual $1,000 Poppy Steak, but that's why people go there, to be in the room when they're banging the thing. And we had this big theme of the year, said, we need our Poppy Steak. We need like the item that very few people buy, but everyone knows we have it. And it was just such a good marketing idea that they did. And I was so impressed.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of Dave Grutman's spots, and he is the king when it comes to branding and marketing and everything around Miami restaurants. So he's leading the way for sure.
Love it. Well, I appreciate you taking the time today. Absolute fan, and look forward to connecting with you soon.
Of course, man. Let me know if you come to Miami. Happy to hang out, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.